You're listening to the Faith Breeds Hope podcast, episode number 12. Today, I had the privilege of speaking with Ryan Romeo on his newly released book, Head in the Clouds, Feet on the Ground, and looking into your God-given dream. Welcome to the Faith Breathed Hope podcast, where we gain inspiration and motivation from others who share their touching stories of renewing hope and discovering purpose in any circumstance. I'm your host, Christina Reisinger, and today we will be encouraged by another tremendously inspirational topic that will embolden you to release fear, begin taking small steps forward, and move into your God-given purpose to live and serve in this life. Join me for today's story. Hey, Ryan, thank you for joining us. I'm so excited that you're here on Faith Breathed Hope today. How are you?
I'm doing great, Christina. Thank you so much for having me on. Yeah.
So for our audience who doesn't know you, can you tell everyone who you are, what you do, a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So first and foremost, I work at my local church. So I oversee our worship and creative arts. So that is my day-to-day job, but it's the job that really, for me, is the most meaningful. I love being a part of church. I love being a part of local church. But outside of that, I am an author. I just wrapped up my second book, which is coming out March 3rd. So it may be out by the time this is aired. So I'm an author. I love writing. My first book I wrote about the tour that a friend of mine and I started called Outcry. Mm-hmm. And Outcry was a worship tour that we went all over the country. We did 90 outcries. Wow. We had about 1 million people attend Outcry. It was a crazy thing. And so as soon as we finished the very first tour, we wrapped up, and a publisher came to me and said, "How did you guys start this? Would you want to write a book?" So my very first book was called Outcry, just kind of about the story of the tour. And now this book is called Head in the Clouds, Feet on the Ground. And I have a new publisher this year, and they're awesome. And it really is just about, what do you do when you have a big dream from God? What do you do when you feel like I'm equipped or I have vision for something that's so much bigger than the season I'm currently in? What do you do with that? And I think a lot of us sideline it, we push it off to the side, or we think it's not very important. But I think big dreams are something that God loves. I think God gives us big dreams, and he gives it to us on purpose. And so that's the Head in the Clouds, Feet on the Ground book that, is just about to come out.
Right. So. And that's what we're talking about today, what you do with the big dreams that you're given. And you have a podcast called Head in the Clouds that when I actually contacted you, I don't know how I missed it, but you had it, and I've been I guess a little binge listening lately. I went out on a run this morning and listened to the newest one that you had, and it was Greatness and Balance, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. So, one of the things that you mentioned in that podcast is how, the first thing is that we need to be of service when we're following our God-given dreams. And, personally, I have noticed that on with what I do as a grief coach and trying to reach people as far as helping them find hope, is that it is about service, but it's also about healing. Can you tell me a little bit about, what it means to be of service and how that kind of intertwines with following your purpose and your God-given dreams?
Absolutely. I think, it's kind of twofold. One, I think a lot of people, when they're pursuing a big dream, they think, oh, for it to be humble, that means that I'm going after a small platform, or I'm not trying to grow my social media platform, or I'm not going to do anything big. And I don't think that necessarily equates humility. I think a lot of us have this sort of false humility when we look at these dreams, and we might go, man, these are really big dreams. They may include a lot of people. That's okay. But it's your heart posture going into it that really, really matters. So the size of the dream doesn't matter as much as what is your heart posture going in. And Jesus said, when we're looking at leaders in the world, the leadership in the world outside of the church says, the important people are being served by everyone around them, that everyone's coming to them saying, what do you need? And he said, we're going to do it the opposite. And he said, for you in this kingdom, the greatest will be the least. So the greatest in the kingdom are going to be the people that are serving the most. And I think in leadership, that doesn't necessarily mean, again, you're doing a small event or that you won't take a place of leadership. You could still take a place of leadership confidently, but the fruit of that has to be building up those around you.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be this. A lot of us, when we're in leaders, and I said this in that podcast, we think being the last to show up and the first to leave is the mark of a leader. And that's not true at all. What you're doing with your platform, how you're building your team, how you're releasing people underneath you to their dreams, that really matters. And it's that heart posture of service that we have to have when we're going into these things. When we're given a place of influence, when we're given a place of authority, which does come in our lives at different seasons, when that comes, everything in us has to be geared toward loving and serving those underneath us. And so that was that last podcast. Greatness in the kingdom is not measured like greatness in the world. It's measured completely differently. And we have to look at our platforms, our influence, our dreams, everything else as falling in line with that ideal that Jesus gave us.
Right. And, lately I have been studying on stewardship. And so, taking what we have been given, some of us can look at things and say, well, we've been given a lot, and so we have a lot expected of us. And there are some people who, they can even look at and say, well, I haven't been given very much. How am I supposed to give? And I think that at least from what I've seen lately, that comes with acknowledgement, and it really begins with gratitude. Being thankful for the little things that you have, and so that you are motivated to take those things, no matter how big or how small, and grow them for the kingdom. And one of the things that came up was that when we are standing before God, just kind of like you said, that heart posture, is that how you stated it? He sees our heart. He knows why we do the things that we do. And when we do them for others out of a pure heart, then he rewards that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think taking seriously the things that are in your hands right now is vital. The reason that my publisher, Zondervan's my publisher this year, and they came back to me and they said, your title's really long. It's head in the clouds, feet on the ground, And I said, I know, but I feel like we need that balance in life. Like we need to be able to keep dreaming. Mm-hmm. And as we get older, we can tend to get pretty cynical. I look young, but I got 3 kids at home and I've been in ministry for a long time. It's easy to get cynical. It's easy to say, I've already dreamed big dreams. I'm going to stop doing that. And as you get older, you have to really fight to keep that dreamer in you alive. You have to have space. You have to create time for that. At the same time, when I'm working with a lot of college students in our internship, for example, they are not keeping their feet on the ground. They're only dreaming and going, man, what if we did all this big stuff? And I'm not really going to be satisfied until I'm doing all the big stuff. And they don't take seriously the season they're in right now. Mm. And I think that's the thing where that's the thing that God really honors. What you have in your hands right now matters. And you look at the life of Joseph. Joseph, for me, was that kind of first, it was the inspiration for the book to begin with. My Bible reading for the day was on the life of Joseph. And I was going, man, this is a man with a dream. Mm-hmm. And then you look at his life and he has this dream that nobody around him understands. He tells his brothers probably a little prematurely and not with the most, grace in the way that he shared it. But they don't understand it. His dad doesn't understand it. And I think I'm like, in my life, that is the case. I had dreams in my life that people closest to me were like, I don't really get why you're doing that, But in the life of Joseph, he has this huge dream, and then his life basically goes down the proverbial toilet. Like he gets sold into slavery. Nothing goes right for Joseph. But
Right.
you see, like when Joseph is in Potiphar's house, he's still a slave, but Potiphar notices, says that everything that Joseph did prospered. He knew that the Lord was with him, even when he was not in a place of influence. Really, when he was at his lowest, it was still really visible that God was working through him. And we have to have that mentality that no matter what season we're in right now, this season is important. Not because it looks important on the outside, but because we believe in God that every season is important and has weight to our life. And when
Mhm.
we look at it that way, we start to see that every little season that we're in really matters. And that when you treat it like that, God brings more. He goes, great, you did really good with this small season. I'm going to
Mhm.
give you a little bit bigger season.
Mhm.
And then you get to the point where I remember when we first launched Outcry, I was really happy being a behind the scenes guy. I was like, you know what? We launched our tour. We launched our very first tour with Hillsong United, Jesus Culture, Carrie Job, Bethel. Who else was on that tour? um, Passion, David Crowder. We launched with a ton
Nice.
of people that were heroes of mine. And
Wow.
I'm going, they don't need me to do anything. Like at this point that they're on this tour is amazing. And so I was just happy being kind of a creative behind the scenes guy. And I remember one day we were in St. Louis, and I don't know why I remember that city, but it was St. Louis, and we were backstage, and Taya from Hillsong United was leading worship along with JD, also from Hillsong United, and these are amazing people. I mean, Taya and Oceans, you're like, come on, they're amazing, amazing leaders. They're leading worship backstage, and we would always have these kind of like devotional worship times, and I was closing my eyes and worshiping like everybody else in the room. And I had this sense that somebody was like staring a hole in my face. And I was like, okay, I got to open my eyes. And I opened my eyes, and it's JD from Hillsong. And he's
Oh,
looking
wow.
at me, and he's like drumming the guitar, and he's like wide eyed. And he kind of does this. He goes, like, shrugs, like, what do you want to do? And it was the first time in my life that I realized, oh, I'm leading back here. Like you guys are all amazing. Like we got Carrie Job in here, and we had like, um, but
Oh,
I
wow.
realized, oh, I'm leading.
Mhm.
And I think up until that point, I would say take your season seriously when it's small.
Mhm.
But that season was really big, and I had to be reminded to take that seriously as well. And I realized, and it was at the end of that tour that I felt so clearly that God said, be confident backstage and lead, not because you're qualified, because you're not, and I was not. I did not have a platinum album under my belt or even a book at that time. I had no pedigree at all. He said, be confident in your calling, not in your ability.
Mhm.
So from that point on, I walked into that room going, I am called to lead in this room. And we would have, I mean, across the years, we had Christine Kane in that room because she was speaking with us. We had Stephen Furtick in that room, Brian from Hillsong, and we just had so many amazing people that blew me away. Um, but still, I felt the anointing to be the leader in that room, not because I earned it, but because I was called to it. And I think when we live a life that takes every season seriously, we will find ourselves in that room where we go, why am I here? This makes no sense at all that I'm called to lead in here. And through every one of those seasons, you have to say yes to God. You have to say, yes,
Mhm.
I will embrace what you have in this season, whether it's small or big. And both seasons have different challenges. And when you embrace it and you say yes, God blesses you and moves you on to a different season. So sorry, I got to get off my soapbox on that one. But
No,
yeah,
no, that's
absolutely.
great. I love
Yeah.
that. Be confident in your calling. I think that, sometimes it's so hard for us to even recognize our calling. Some people say, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
But for me, I can say for me, it's a feeling. And there's so many people out there, oh, don't listen to your feelings, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
for me, it's one of those things where you don't know why you're doing it. you don't know why you're doing it. You just feel the urge to do it. And I mean, I know we can get in trouble with that because that could be a direction of the flesh instead
Sure.
of the spirit. But
Yeah.
I think that there's some times where the Lord puts things in us and we know that we know that we know. We don't know why we know, and maybe we don't know how.
Yeah.
But we feel the need to stay the course and to persevere and be
Yeah.
diligent and faithful,
For
even
sure.
if
And
we can't see. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And like before I got into Outcry, when I first I got saved when I was in um, high school. I became a Christian when I was in high school. I came from no Christian background. My parents weren't Christian, nothing like that. And I had a youth pastor that just really spent a lot of time with me and brought me into his small group and started teaching me about the Bible. And so something really shifted in my life at that point. And and I remember it was probably the mid '90s, something like that. And there was a group called Delirious that was really popular at the time, and they were a worship band.
Mm-hmm.
And it was right when Louis Giglio started Passion, so Passion came out with their first album. So like the first time I'd ever heard Chris Tomlin was on that album,
Okay.
and I had heard these couple of live albums, and they made a huge impact on me. And I remember listening to Delirious one day and really feeling, like you said, this emotion, this feeling of being called um, to do something big in the worship world.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't sure what that was. I was a worship leader at the time, so I figured, oh, it must be like in leading worship and writing songs. And but looking back, and I kind of write about this in the book, looking back, I kind of call it a prophetic echo, this sort of like echo of what I was going to do. I wasn't fully sure what it was going to be, but I kind of knew the general idea. So I was going, I think it's going to be in the area of a live event with worship. And it's so hard to articulate, but from that point back, I was going, I feel so clear about this, you know. And fast forward to 2015 when we launched Outcry, and I'm leading backstage, but not leading on stage as a worship leader, speaking or doing something like that. It was not exactly what I imagined, but God had given me that sort of prophetic echo, this echo of what I was going to be doing far before I actually started doing it. And and that's kind of the joy of this journey of figuring out what we're called to do. Um, our dreams really are those feelings that we have early on in life. Really are these sort of like precursors or these echoes of what we're about to be doing. Um, but there are people, and I talk to a lot of people as I've been diving into my podcast, going, Ryan, I don't even really know what I'm called to do. I don't know what I'm passionate about because there's like 8 different things that I'm passionate about, and it's tough. I mean, I know I was that same sort of person, and but God has a way of narrowing you down. You know, God has a way of sort of bringing something along in your life that's surprising.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I know you and I talked before this. Sometimes really something really painful in life, like a loss of a loved one or something like that, propels you into something different that you didn't anticipate. But I do think that God gives us these when we have an ear to listen, when we're pausing to go, okay, God, what are you telling me about me? What do you want me to be really diving into in this season? I think God is really faithful to give us a little bit of a heads up of like, hey, you know, I want you to be working on this area. Or some of us may feel this general, hey, one day I might be called to speak. I don't know what that looks like. I have no idea what that platform looks like, but I just have this general sense that I'm going toward that. Or some people are like, I feel like I'm called to write, and maybe one day I'm going to write something and I'm not really sure what I'm going to be writing. And I always challenge people to keep an ear out for what Jesus is saying. Keep that relationship up with God, and at the same time, keep searching and looking for that diligent thing that you could be doing in the season that you're in right now. And God will fill in the rest. God really will lead you into the rest. And for a lot of us, it's going to be surprising. It'll be For me, I felt like by the time some of the stuff that I was so passionate about came to pass, I was like, wait, slow down, God. Like, I was so excited about this 10 years ago. Now I'm like, no, this is a little too big. I don't really know. I feel like I needed some more pedigree before I got to this point. And I think that that is one thing that you just have to anticipate. Like, when that time comes, God is going to push you beyond what you think you could do in the natural, so that you could look back and go, okay, God really filled in the gap between what I can do and what he can do, you know? And so we have to keep pushing into that vein.
Right. And I think that that's, where we trust. So,
Mm.
I have actually had that prayer recently. I say, we want to be guided. We want to be used. And when I specifically pray about that, then I have to take a kind of a sidestep and say, okay, God, once you finally bring me the things that I'm asking for, I still need you, and I might need you even more, because I need you to guide my steps. I need you to speak through me so that I know I'm fallible. So, I know that when you work through me, the things that need to be said, things that need to be heard will be done. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of a scary little leap there. I think,
It
I
is.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
and it's like it reminds me of when Paul was saying, like I've learned to be satisfied in every season of my life, in lack or in excess. Like he kind of goes through all of these sort of opposites. And I do think it's really important that that we're faithful in the lacking seasons, that
mhm,
maybe we're just waking up in the morning is the win. And there's a lot of people I talk to that there are seasons of their life where just moving forward and finishing your day every day is the
mhm,
battle that you have in front of you.
mhm,
And that has different things that you have to tackle, different challenges that you have to rely on God for. Then
mhm,
there's other seasons where the wind is at your back and you're taking all this ground going, wow, I can't believe that all this stuff is happening. And then you face different challenges. And you have to be prepared in all seasons to say, okay, I'm going to find my satisfaction in the presence of God above all else. Because if you're in a lack season and you think that an excessive beautiful season is going to be less challenging, it's going to be really disappointing. You're going to get there and go, oh, well, maybe I am waking up every morning and that's okay, but I have new challenges, or I have new critics that are popping up, or whatever it is, things that you have to face in times where you're feeling that wind at your back. But in every one of those seasons, you have to realize I am just as reliant on God in the good times as I am on the bad
mhm,
times. And I think that is an attitude that the Lord blesses. I really do. I think that that is an attitude that God says, yes, that's the kind of attitude I want in the people that are following me, is in no matter what season you're facing, to say, I need God just as much now as I did then.
mhm.
So
Right. And you earlier you talked about narrowing things down. So
yeah,
um personally, I am that person who has been into everything. So people will be like squirrel kind of thing, like,
yes,
oh my goodness, I'm creative, and I just love
yeah,
to jump into everything. And you know, when people listen to the podcast, and if they know me, they know that my daughter passed away in 2016. So that
yeah,
was that narrowing for me. And
yeah,
I didn't know what it looked like.
mm,
Um,
yeah,
and so that was kind of, I guess, God getting my attention and say, hey, you need to start being of service to other people.
mm,
Um, but I work with people who are in that lack, and when you um, are in that lack, it's very difficult to even see that God has anything good for you at all,
yeah,
um, especially when you're going through loss. And just learning to find that hope again, and learning to listen to the
yeah,
Lord and be in His presence
yeah,
is
yeah,
is can be difficult. It's like you said, getting out of bed um, can be
yeah,
hard, but honoring Him then. But then once you have kind of gone over that hump, I like that what you said, that you've gone over that area, that hump of that lack and you go into abundance, you still need God. You know, you hear people say that they reach out to the Lord when they need something, but
Yeah,
you're always in need, aren't you?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's the, having just written a book about dreams, but working in the local church, it's like I'm constantly talking to people in all different walks of life. I have a really good friend who has a young family, and he's battling cancer, and it's
Mm,
not great. We've had people in the church that have lost uh, very little children to cancer, and it's really, really painful. And those are seasons that when I'm working with people like that, it's like, hey, just waking up in the morning is your miracle, and
mhm.
that's okay. Like, you don't need to be like taking a bunch of spiritual ground. Just waking up is you winning the battle every morning, and I know all about that. But this is where the blessing of, there is those seasons where you come out of grief and dreams start to get awakened in you again, and maybe things that woke you up in the middle of the night in your 20s are starting to wake you up again, and going, this is a blessing from the Lord, not a distraction, but a true blessing of awakening things inside of us. And this is where I think in church culture right now, we shy away from the idea of God, like, pursue dreams that are inside of us, and we feel this need to, like, this knee-jerk reaction to go, yes, follow your dreams, but only if they look like this and only if they're
Yeah.
like that. And we don't even want to say follow your dreams because it sounds like this scary thing, and like
Mhm.
people are going to go off the deep end or something into some sort of crazy sin if we tell them to follow their dreams. And I just started to get some perspective from God recently in the last few years, that he loves big dreams and the blessing of pursuing something so outside of us. And I just started to see, why in the church do we feel the need to kind of like squash people down? Why do we feel this like knee-jerk reaction to go, oh no, don't go too big, because somehow you're
Mhm.
not going to be humble if you do something really big? And I go, no, I think as the church, we need to be the group that is tackling things that the world is like, what on earth are you doing? We see organizations that really did come out of Christian principles, like World Vision, or some of these people that I've worked with that are making a huge, huge worldwide impact. And when you work with organizations like that, they have this urgency about them. World Vision was a group that we partnered with for Outcry.
Mhm.
Their urgency when it comes to human trafficking, their urgency when it comes to feeding kids, because they're seeing the practical needs out on the field and going, we need more funding to take care of this problem or this problem. There's something so beautiful about that urgency. And I
Mhm.
don't think it has to just reside in the justice, serving the poor area of the church. I think it's an urgency that can infect the creatives in the church. Like, we need to be using video and social media and creativity to tell the beautiful story of Jesus. We need urgency when it comes to telling people about Jesus. There's an explosion of like evangelist, kind of a new sort of evangelism that I'm seeing kind of pop up, that I'm like, this is so awesome. And I think when we go through some times of pain, there is that season where we have to come back on the other side and go, that what if in my heart, that like, what if God did this in my life, is so beautiful. And I need to sometimes pour a little gasoline on it. Sometimes I need to take a step of faith and say, I'm going to start chasing this what if in my heart, not just to distract myself from coping with something painful, but truly with a sense of faith and urgency of going, we don't have long on this earth to make a huge impact for the kingdom, and we each can make a huge impact for the kingdom. And I'm going to take this dream in my heart really seriously and steward it like anything else, like gifts that you have, like money that you have in the bank. It doesn't matter what you have in your hands right now. You are called to steward toward the kingdom.
Mhm.
And I've been telling the story of the parable of the talents a lot lately. And the parable of the talents, when Jesus is saying, hey, I've given you, the story real quick for anybody not familiar, it's like he's got the servants underneath him, and he gives 10 talents to this one and 5 to another and 1 to another. And talents meaning money. And each one of them goes and invests it for the master. And when the master comes back, he goes to the guy who had 10 talents and he said, "What did you do?" And the guy said, "I invested these 10 talents and I got 10 more talents for you." And he goes, "Well done, faithful servant, enter into my kingdom." He goes to the last guy that has 1 talent, and the last guy says, "I got scared basically, and I buried the money in my backyard. And I dug it up when I saw you were here. Here's your one thing back.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "You wicked and lazy servant." And I wish Jesus used softer language than that because it's pretty harsh. But at the same time, to understand like what we have in our hands, and it's not just money. It's
Mm-hmm.
talents, it's dreams, it's vision, it's the people, the social media following. As much as we poo-poo that or like say that that's not a big deal, no, there are people that you have their ear right now, and what you do with that really, really matters. What you do with every facet of influence in this world matters in terms of investment for the kingdom. And I just had this sense, a couple years ago when I started really talking about that story of going, I do not want God to say, "You wicked and lazy servant" to me. I want him to go, "You did a really good job. I gave you gifts. I gave you talents. I gave you a certain level of influence. You invested it, you grew it, and you did it for my glory. And I'm proud of you." Like that is what I want to hear from God in
Mm-hmm.
everything that I'm doing. And it doesn't mean I forsake my family. It doesn't mean I stop spending time with my kids, because Sabbath is huge. It's very, very important. Spending time with your family is very, very important. But at the same time, what you do with the rest of your time is also very, very important when it comes to the kingdom. So,
Yeah. And like I said, this has been coming up for me a lot lately. And in fact, I started a women in entrepreneurship prayer group and Bible study, and this is what I spoke on this month. But you know, like you said, it's not just money. It's not
yeah,
finances. It's everything. It's your talents that you've been given that you may not even acknowledge. You may
yeah,
look at and say, "Oh, everybody can do this." Well, no, not everybody is comfortable with that. Not everybody can do it to that extent. And
yeah,
maybe you grow that. And then, recently I've really been thinking a lot about how that applies to your God-given dreams.
mm-hmm.
This thing that God is calling you to do, and maybe you don't see but one piece of it right now. Maybe
Yeah,
you don't have any clue where it's going, but
yeah,
you take the little bit that you've been given and you trust Him to, with it, and you work with it and you develop it so that He can trust you with more. And then you
yeah,
continue to ask, Jesus to just feed you and feed your soul and help you produce the fruit that He wants you to produce for Him.
yeah, absolutely. I think
So,
you said something really important when you said, like when you say, "Oh, everybody's good at that." And I think that it like as equal as, and this was a big part of the book for me, as equal as saying this season, I take this season really seriously. Um, Taking the life that you've been given, taking yourself seriously is as equally as important.
mm,
Um, Not taking for granted the skin you reside in, like understanding that what you bring to the table is so unique. And I started going through a bunch of research about the uniqueness of human beings on a DNA level. And there's this big section, this chunk of the book where I kind of talk about it. And I went through enough research that I was like, I'm barely qualified to even understand what they're talking about. But the gist was this: that there was a guy that said, the when DNA is created for us, it's this mixture, yes, of your mom and dad, but it's so much more complicated than that. And there's basically billions of different combinations that can happen, so that even identical twins aren't identical. They don't have the same DNA. They're different. And the guy said the probability of somebody else on Earth having throughout history, having your same DNA is less than the probability of grabbing two random atoms in the known universe and them being the same atom. He said grabbing the same atom twice randomly in the universe. He goes, that is how, he goes, statistically, it's impossible for us to have the same DNA as somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And what blew me away was we take for granted. I mean, we talk about the Enneagram and we talk about, taking personality tests. I think those are great. They're really, really awesome. But an Enneagram will never fully explain who you are. I'm an Enneagram 3, but that doesn't mean that everything in my life is Enneagram 3. I'm also Ryan. There's this complicated part of me that I have life experience, and I have, good things and bad things that have happened in my past that turned me into who I am. On a DNA scientific level, I am completely different than anybody else that's ever lived on Earth. And so are you, Christina, everybody has that sort of, I am unique to the point where I don't even fully understand how unique I am. And when you start to really take seriously the things that are in your life, your giftings, your talents, your abilities, your life experience, everything else, when you come to the table, not in a place of being defensive about who you are, but being confident in who you are, then everything starts to shift, and it's not pride. It's a confidence in who you are that's kind of found in a humility of understanding how complicated God's made you, But when you come at it with that sort of personality or with that sort of mindset about your personality and understanding I am really unique, you walk into meetings, you walk into spaces with a little bit different level of confidence than you had before. And you walk in going, look, nobody in this room is like I am. And the perspectives that I bring to the table are really, really important. And I've seen this time and time again where people are like, yeah, I have this dream and it sounds a lot like everybody else's dream. It's like this, But the more you dig into it, the more you go, no, your dream is not like everybody else's dream. Your dream is like your fingerprint. It may look like everybody else's, from far away, but the closer you get to it, the more unique you realize that it is. And when we start pursuing life that way, not just taking our season seriously, but taking ourselves seriously, then we walk into these rooms with a lot more confidence. And we can start pursuing things that we feel like God's given us, understanding that he has given us that mandate and nobody else on earth has the same mandate that you do. Everybody has this subtly unique calling that you have to figure out and find. And it shifts and it changes. It's not like, buried treasure where you find your calling. It comes in seasons. It's like this, it's always unfolding on you. It's always expanding on you. I talked in my podcast about how last year I had to cancel Outcry because of lack of ticket sales. And it was painful. And there was a big part of me that just wanted to sweep it under the rug and forget it even happened. And about a month later, I did a podcast and I called it What Happened to Outcry. And I thought, I have to process this with the people that I have influence with. I have to process my losses as well as my wins, And I had to say, Outcry is not my calling. It was a season of my life and part of a calling for me. But then when it goes away, I have to be able to pivot and go, okay, God, well, what's the next thing? And he's been really faithful to give me some new dreams, and there's been some things that I haven't shared publicly yet, but there's some things happening for me behind the scenes that I'm going, man, I'm so excited about this thing. And it's keeping me up at night, and it may fail just like any other thing that I've ever dreamed of. But that calling is this kind of ever evolving, ever changing sort of journey with God. The Bible says his word is a lamp unto your feet. A lamp only shows you one or two steps in front of you, so you're going, okay, this calling of God is just kind of like slowly meandering forward. And I got the next one or two steps maybe that I have clarity on. I got to take those steps, and then God's going to reveal some more to me, So
I love that because, we're supposed to be clear on our vision, but, we have, like you said, there are different seasons and different steps that are delivered in the right time. And, we get our confidence from the Lord. He gives us all those talents. in the gifts and blessings. And I feel like that is confidence, but it's also the ability again to be grateful and be good
Yes.
stewards of what we have been given.
Yeah.
But you know, one time somebody told me, and this has blew my mind. I don't know why, but I never thought about this. But I guess I was upset about someone who was not validating me. And I was told, you know what, we get our validation from the Lord. And that's where we are going to gain our confidence. That's where we're going to see our gratitude. And
Yeah.
that is where we're going to get our motivation and willingness to be good stewards of the little things that we are given.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. Sometimes the people closest to us can say, there's times where there's one or two times where my wife's like, "What are you thinking?" And then it happens, and she goes, "Oh, okay, I get it now." Um, we're not fully known by anybody in life. Jesus is the only one that fully knows us, the intricacies of us, the stuff inside of us that we can't even really articulate ourselves. There's nobody in life, and there's going to be leaders that are really encouraging to you, and there's leaders that aren't so encouraging to you,
mm,
and maybe even the encouraging leaders have seasons where they're discouraging you, and you have to constantly go, okay, like you said, my validation is from the Lord.
mhm,
I have to continually come back and say, okay, God, is this from you or is it not? Did I do something wrong in this season or didn't I? And there's times where the Lord's like, yes, Ryan, you did something wrong and you need to fix it. And it's like, okay. There's other times where God's like, no, this is just one of those seasons where you and I need to go at this together. Me and God need to go at a season together. And that reliance on his validation, reliance on, like we're just talking, the pastor at our church, we were talking about when they were moving the Ark of the Covenant, and David said, I want you to take 6 steps with the ark and then stop and pray. And we use that phrase all the time in our church. 6 steps and then pray. Like just go a little bit and go, God, are you still with me? Or you want, and you get to that point where you really value, kind of like Moses when he said, if you're not going to go with me into the promised land, I don't want to go,
mhm,
and you get to that maturity, and it doesn't mean you don't pursue dreams and everything else, but you do reach that maturity in understanding that I value the presence of God over the promised land. I value God being with me more than the ground that I'm going to take for him. And just on that equal level of, obviously we do have things in our hands and we're responsible for working hard and getting it done. And it's funny, I've posted on social media a big thing saying working hard is a Christian thing. Sometimes I think we need to remind ourselves of that sometimes. But then those of us that are, driven, type A sort of people, Enneagram threes kind of people, we do need to pause and go, okay, but more than the accomplishment, more than anything else, I just want God to be with me.
mhm,
Um, and if you don't have that sort of foundation, if you don't continually go back there, then the voice of critics in your life are going to tear you down and sideline you. The setbacks in your life, the failures you go through are going to sideline you if you don't have that sort of deep foundation with God. These things that are almost certain to happen in the life of somebody who dreams of something big, you're
mhm,
going to have these things come along. I call them in the book, I call them dream killers. You're going to have dream killers come along and try to sideline you. That's why your foundation with Jesus is so vital. Because if that's not there, you're going to have that one critic show up in your life and you're going to go, he or she's right. Who am I to be dreaming such a big thing? I should give up on it. That external critic starts to becoming an internal critic in our mind. We start running these like, yes, who am I? I don't have any pedigree. I don't have any. And without that relationship with Jesus, without that understanding of who he is in our lives, we are going to be sidelined really quick.
right. And I love that taking the small steps and then stopping and checking in with the Lord. Sorry, um,
Yeah.
because like you said, A, you find your validation there, but B, it helps to keep you humble. And
Yeah.
you may or may not be going in the right direction, and you can kind of check in and say, okay, God, what's next? Because that shows great trust when you can't see the path that God is leading you on. um, you have to trust God to that he's taking you where you're supposed to be. And that is one of my prayers is, God, show me where to go next, kind of a thing, because I want you to work through me. um,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where stewardship comes in. I mean, and that's why I've said, and I really realized in the middle of writing this book that it was not in the middle, in the beginning of it, that, these dreams that God gives us, when we look at them as something we own,
mhm,
then we can look at it in a really unhealthy way. We could either look at it through insecurity and go, oh man, well, I'm going to be pursuing this big dream, but it's me putting myself out there. Now I'm scared. Now I'm locked up from fear or anything else. You could approach it the other way too and say, oh yeah, this is my dream. I'm confidently going out there and I have to make this future for myself. And I don't think either one of those is healthy.
mhm,
The only way you walk in between them is understanding that you're stewarding a dream, that you're
mhm,
stewarding something that God gave to you in the first place. And it's a confidence that's born in the humility of understanding that you didn't gin it up. You didn't make this for yourself. God made you in a certain way. God gave you certain passions and talents and things that you want to see happen, vision for things that are in your sphere of influence. He gave them to you on purpose, and your job is to steward them, not to own them, not to say, I made this thing happen, or oh my God, I got to make this thing happen. No, 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 that's not it. It's, Lord, I know you've given me this thing, and
mhm,
I want to pursue it the absolute best that I can for your glory. And that is, I think, an attitude that shifts everything. So
mhm.
stewardship, I think, is so key.
Right. And if you mentioned earlier that there are people that come to you and they say, well, I don't know what that dream could be. I don't have a vision yet. Maybe they're not in that place of lack, but they just can't see anything big.
Yeah.
What would you tell them in that instance? They say, well, I want to do something big, but I really don't know what.
Yeah. Well, I think God releases vision um, with purposeful timing.
Hmm.
So when you start gaining vision, don't take that for granted. So I remember, so right now I oversee our worship and creative arts. I oversee all of our video here at the church and everything else. But 7 years ago when I started here, um, I came in and I was like, oh man, and kind of my youthful exuberance came in and said, man, we got to change everything around here all the time. And I was gaining like all this vision. And I started to think, well, you know what? Maybe all this vision is just me being prideful and trying to like muscle things around here. And right when I started to think about that, I showed up on our Sunday morning and I felt like the Lord took all of my good ideas away. And I remember sitting there on Sunday morning going, I don't have any ideas. I don't know how to make this better. I don't. And in that, I felt the Lord say to me, Ryan, the fact that you have ideas is miraculous. Like, number one, you need to be able to don't take that for granted. And so when you start to get vision, don't just put it off to the side. Start to really lean into it. Start to pray into it and go, okay, God, if you're giving me vision, now what I have to really pray about is timing. And so there's that sort of thing. But I do think if you are in a season where you're going, I'm not seeing anything, I don't have any vision, I need to like try to make myself come up with some vision. No, lean into that season just as much and go, okay, God, you're not giving me vision for this. And maybe I had a bunch of vision for it in my 20s, but maybe I'm in my 30s or pushing my 40s and I don't have that same vision. That's okay. Really lean into the Lord in that season, and He's going to release vision at a timing that is purposeful. And so I would say that for people that are not gaining a lot of vision, that like, I don't even know what my dream is, I would say, okay, well, what season are you in right now? Okay, you're working at Starbucks. Well, work really well at Starbucks. Have that sort of Joseph mentality of going, in Potiphar's house, Joseph made a name for himself as somebody who could get things done for Potiphar. He wasn't the most powerful guy in the land like he was going to be. He was just in one household as a slave, but he made a name for himself as somebody who worked really hard, and everything he put his hand to prospered. And I think that's an attitude we have to have. If you don't have vision for this season, if you don't have dreams for big dreams that are coming up to you right now, or maybe you have like 6 different dreams that are going on,
Yeah.
you have to kind of like sort through them and wait, because the timing is everything with the Lord. And as soon as it's released, it's a lot more clear than we think. As soon as it happens, I remember I told everybody when we were dreaming about doing Outcry, in my mind, I wanted to have, 1,000 people a night or something. I'm like, that would be amazing. And when we launched Outcry, our very first time out, we averaged, 10 to 20,000 people a night.
Nice.
And it was unbelievable.
Wow.
And I always tell everybody, I'm like, I would have started Outcry a whole lot smarter than we, or a whole lot smaller than we started it. In my mind, I was like, man, we're going to have 1,000 people. And God's like, how about we do 10 to 20 times that?
Wow.
And when it started, it was like I couldn't stop it if I wanted to. And there were moments where I wanted to stop it. It was like too much. Our tour, we're burning through $1 million a week. And it was just outrageous. I had never experienced that sort of pressure. And it was both beautiful and also the most difficult thing I had ever done in my life. So I think a lot of us, we don't need to make that happen. We don't need to try to grab a platform before it's given to us. And that's where even in the very beginning of this interview, we were talking about taking this season seriously. And honestly, for the people out there that don't have vision for the future, or maybe they have 18 visions for the future, you're kind of both in the same camp where you need to look at your current season and go, okay, how can I be really diligent here and win here? And maybe I have a really terrible boss, but I'm going to work really hard for that terrible boss and make them happy about the work that I'm doing. Right. Or maybe, there are just those seasons that are in life where we have to know that in the context of our whole life, this is just one season, but what we do with that season really, really matters.
Right. And that all goes back to that stewardship that we've been talking about, and being able to trust God with little things and in the big, big things, because we know that we need him always for everything. So, absolutely. All right, Ryan, can you tell us where we can find Head in the Clouds, Feet on the Ground, right?
Yes, Head in the Clouds, Feet on the Ground. So it's going to be on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and kind of all the major bookstores. And I think right now it's funny because we're still a couple weeks out from release right now. But the URL that I got from my publisher is readheadintheclouds.com was the website that they were going to post like all the stuff around there. But follow on social media. I mean, that's the easiest thing, at Ryan Romeo everywhere, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Instagram's kind of my favorite platform. So jump on there because I'm going to be talking a lot about where to grab the book. But yeah, it's coming out March 3rd and I'm super excited about it. I'm
excited about it too. And we will definitely put the links to get in touch with you or find the book in the show notes rather. So awesome. I am so excited that you joined me for this, and hopefully we can talk soon. I'm looking forward to your book coming out.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Christina. It was an honor to be on. Thanks for having me.
And I want to thank you for joining us on Faith Breathed Hope, where you gain inspiration and motivation to renew hope and discover purpose in any circumstance. Please like and share this podcast and give us a review on iTunes. Be blessed.